Hello, BookTube. Well, it's the beginning of March, and that means the beginning of a whole lot here on BookTube. A whole lot. You once thought before BookTube that your reading life was a nice, quiet preserve of peace and contentment. No, no, you've got people bragging at you from all different levels. There are all sorts of BookTube events in March, and there are also BookTube clubs, book clubs that have sprung up on BookTube. Now, I know there are a lot of them. Most of them I don't know about, but I know there are hundreds of them. I know about, I'm going to concentrate today on three. One is my own, of course, the Steve Tiberius Donahue Book Club, which starts today. But I want also to talk just a little in a couple of videos today about two others that are near and dear to my heart. There's Randy Ray, the literate Texan, who has started a book club, the Lone Star Book Club. And his March pick is The Getaway by Jim Thompson, a 1958 novel by Jim Thompson. It was made into a famous movie with Steve McQueen that did really well. Audiences really liked it. So you might know it from that. I think it's a lot more likely that you'll know it from that than you will know it from reading it, because unfortunately, although Jim Thompson has always deserved a wide readership, he's never really had one. And I don't know that this book would get him one. He is a tough author to come to love. The Getaway was... It is not a beginning effort. He'd written two dozen books or more before he wrote this. And yet I don't believe that it feels that way until the very end. The very ending of this book used to spark literary debate. Of course, no one debates Jim Thompson anymore. But the ending of this book, the very ending, the last 20 pages, something like that, is very different from the rest of the book. The last 5 pages is very different even from that. You don't have to prepare yourself for that because there is a page-turning story in between. But the debate about the tonal shift at the end of this book has always been, is it that Jim Thompson, who almost never wrote sober, 6 packs a day, a wreck, a genius, but a wreck. God only knows the exact conditions under which most of his books were written, even his great ones. I don't think anyone would call this one a great one. This is Randy's choice for March for the Lone Star Book Club, The Getaway. And the two opinions about the tonal shift at the end of this book have been, one, that whatever ramshackle compositional process Jim Thompson used to write these things broke down at the end. So he was didn't even know what he was typing. And then the other, not many people hold it, I've held it all the while, all the 20th century, is that the end of this book is an author growing so impatient with what he viewed as the strictures of crime stories that he was fighting against them at the end of his book. I think it's easier to read the end of this book that way, but that'll be up for you to decide. In the Lone Star Book Club, you have March to read this book, and it's not a long book, but you're going to need all the time in the world because of all the other reading clubs that you're part of, all the other events that you're part of. Well, this one could double for, it certainly won't double for March Mystery Madness, or for March of the Mammoths, because it's very slim, but it would for March Mystery Madness. March Mystery Madness tends to include crime fiction, which is what this is. There's no real mystery here. There are a couple of reveals, a couple of red herrings. There's one surprise, let's just say, the surprise return of a character in the meat and potatoes of the book, well into the book, that I don't think you'll see coming. The first time I read this thing, I did not expect it. And it's fairly well done. The surprise reveal is fairly well done. It'll startle you when you're reading it for the first time. This is a story of a character named Dr. McCoy, but not my Dr. McCoy. This is the story of a criminal mastermind named Dr. McCoy, Doc McCoy, who has been released from a long prison term. He got a long prison term, and his wife arranged a deal with his parole board to get him out. We don't learn the details of that deal for quite some time in this book, and neither does Doc, and that bothers him. I want to stress a point that a critic about this book made when it first came out, which is that if you meet someone in real life or in fiction who is calling himself or allowing himself to be called a criminal mastermind, and that person has ever spent time in jail, they're lying. Prisons are full of criminal masterminds, self-described criminal masterminds. And there's not much, when you're watching Doc McCoy in the course of this book, there's not much that would give you any indication of this whole criminal mastermind business. He has an idea. Out of prison, he has an idea. His big idea is not to give up crime, for which he risks going back for a much longer stretch. The next long stretch he pulls in prison will see him into old age, and he knows that's the end. He wants to avoid that at all costs. But his grand plan is not to avoid crime. It's to pull a great bank heist and then lam it to Mexico, where they will not be extradited. The book and the time period sort of giving itself away there. Again, a word of caution to all of you new readers of crime fiction. Not only should you not trust anyone who calls himself a criminal mastermind if he's ever spent time in jail, because the criminal masterminds don't, but also you can be extradited from Mexico. If you commit a bank robbery and kill someone, you can be extradited. So this plan would have worked, I guess, in a kind of cockamamie way at the time. You would have to assume false identities and whatnot. Doc McCoy doesn't seem like much of a criminal mastermind in the course of this book. He's thought out his crime a little bit better than the absolute, complete, raving psycho that is his associate. But that's not saying much. There's a bank, and the main thing that Doc McCoy is known for is not so much his smarts as his shots. When he shoots, he doesn't bother to check whether or not he's hit his target, because he never misses. And he never wounds somebody that he intends to kill. And he rests in the sureness of that, which comes back to bite him, which is good. It's good that Jim Thompson would do that, because that's never true. That never ends up being true. In good fiction, when we're told that about a character, they are bound to miss their shot at some point. It's Chekhov's gun of crime fiction. But Doc McCoy has a wife. He has transformed her from a mousy librarian into a sexy mall. I don't trust that transformation procedure. I think it smacks of sexism. Its one redeeming quality in the course of this book is that Doc McCoy doesn't trust it either. And I don't know, the whole time that I reread this for the Lone Star Book Club, and the whole time that I was rereading it, I was thinking, I admit, pedagogical thoughts rather than just edge of my seat thoughts. I was wondering how first-time readers of Jim Thompson what they're going to make of this book. Especially first-time readers of Jim Thompson who are born in or near the beginning of the 21st century. Randy has a lot of young viewers. I wonder what on earth you will make of this book. I've been trying to figure it out, and I don't know. I really don't. There are some narrative aspects here, some narrative techniques. They're not as well done in this book as they are in Jim Thompson's greater books. I think the example that people go to here is The Killer Inside Me, but also The Grifters, I think, is better, and a lot of others. They're not as well done in this book as they are. This book very much feels like it was sweated out over a typewriter with, a bottle of bourbon. It's good for that, because Jim Thompson was really good. It must have really boiled him that the world did not largely see that. That must have really boiled him in the course of his life. I think that might have strengthened his identification with idealistic losers, which runs throughout his book, and which I think, if we're being uncharitable, certainly applies to him. I won't go on a Jesuitical lecture here about how much better his life would have been if he hadn't been constantly, and I mean every minute of every day, making it worse himself. I won't lecture about that. All I'll say is that even in this book, which I think is imperfect even before it gets to that controversial ending, you can still see something strange going on. And the critics of the time also saw it. The few critics who bothered to pay attention to Jim Thompson's crime novels would pick them up with their lurid dime store covers. Didn't look like this. This was from was it Vintage Crime? I don't know who did this. I remember when these trade paperbacks were coming out, I rejoiced. I was working at a bookstore at the time, and I told everybody, oh my God, here we got the first couple in a shipment, and I thought, oh my God, here's hoping the publisher reprints them all with these noirish covers and these slanted sticker attributions. Let's hope. And they did. They reprinted a whole bunch of them this way. the older versions of these had more lurid covers. The little paperbacks had more lurid covers, and every once in a while a critic would pick them up, usually for their own enjoyment. It was not part of their job. It was not the sack of galleys that they were bringing home to their fifth floor walk up. They just on the way they would buy a couple of paperbacks from a spinner rack at the drugstore, and when they read them, when they actually read a Jim Thompson, maybe for the first time, thinking of escapist getaway fiction, crime fiction at its worst, they saw, all of them did, oh, something else is going on here. This author's really good. There's something new and interesting going on here, and the prose is interesting. Not a lot of them couldn't convince an editor to get over the snobbery of actually giving these things a review. But even the reviews, they were scant, and they also weren't appreciative enough. I think that deep down inside, underneath all the layers that needed psychoanalysis or electroshock therapy or exorcism, underneath all of those layers, I think Jim Thompson knew how talented he was. I think most Texas writers do, even when they're actively sabotaging their liver and their lungs and their brain. I think he knew, and I think he felt underappreciated by the literary world. I think he knew that he was writing something the world should be paying attention to. I think it would have satisfied him that the world has since acknowledged that he is this archetypal figure in crime fiction history. I think he would have liked that. But I don't know how much of that you're going to see when you're reading this book. I'm hoping a lot. I loved rereading it. Flaws notwithstanding, I loved rereading it. There are lots of gimmicks in here. This is gimmicky prose. It's good prose, and it gets wiser and smarter as it goes along, as I think Thompson gets less and less patient with the template that he himself has created here. But the gimmicks are easy to spot. Oh my God, they're easy to spot. You can see them coming a mile away. And as is true in most of Jim Thompson's novels, first of all, the number one thing you need to learn in a Jim Thompson novel is don't get attached to any character. Anybody could die at any minute. But the other thing that I often notice in Jim Thompson books when I reread them is that a lot of times some of the characters that get killed offhand early on, I really wish had stuck around. I don't think Doc McCoy is all that interesting, for instance. And his wife certainly is not given the chance to be interesting. And yet we get a lot of them when we don't get a lot of characters that I might like to have seen more of. But the insights here into humanity, I know that sounds horrible. Jim Thompson would have rolled his eyes at that more than anybody. But the insights into humanity here are not what you see in a usual crime novel, especially from the time. They're orders of magnitude better. I think you'll notice that no matter how distracted you are by the violence, or what could be viewed as the nihilism, or the gimmicks, no matter how much that distracts you, I bet you'll see what I'm talking about. The insights into humanity here, all humanity in every character, they're bitter, but they come from wisdom, a kind of wisdom. Not a kind of wisdom that is very easy to acquire, not a kind of wisdom you would want, but definitely not the normal dime store thing. So this is a very interesting pick on Randy's part. I strongly urge all of you to join the Lone Star Book Club. I will leave a link to his announcement video down below. And I don't know, when it comes to BookTube book clubs, I never know how much the host is going to talk about the book. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But I wanted to talk about this just a bit because I'm part of the Lone Star Book Club now myself. So there you go. That's one of the many book clubs unfolding for you on BookTube this month. God help us all. I'll be back, though. Thank you, BookTube.